Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Second, The Golden Thread, Chapter 14, The Honest Tradesman. To the eyes of Mr. Jeremiah Cruncher, sitting on his stool in Fleet Street, with his grisly urchin beside him, a vast number and variety of objects in movement were every day presented. Who could sit upon anything in Fleet Street during the busy hours of the day, and not be dazed and deafened by two immense processions, one ever tending westward with the sun, the other ever tending eastward from the sun, both ever tending to the plains beyond the range of red and purple where the sun goes down. With his straw in his mouth, Mr. Cruncher sat watching the two streams, like the heathen rustic who has for several centuries been on duty watching one stream, saving that Jerry had no expectation of their ever running dry. Nor would it have been an expectation of a hopeful kind, since a small part of his income was derived from the pilotage of timid women, mostly of a full habit and past the middle term of life, from Tellson's side of the tides to the opposite shore. Brief as such companionship was in every separate instance, Mr. Cruncher never failed to become so interested in the lady as to express a strong desire to have the honor of drinking her very good health, and it was from the gifts bestowed upon him toward the execution of his benevolent purpose that he recruited his finances. And just now observed, time was when a poet sat upon a stool in a public place and mused in the sight of men. Mr. Cruncher, sitting on a stool in a public place, was not being a poet, mused as little as possible, and looked about him. It fell out that he was thus engaged in a season when crowds were few and belated women few, and when his affairs in general were so unprosperous as to awaken a strong suspicion in his breast that Mrs. Cruncher must have been flopping in some pointed manner, when an unusual concourse, pouring down Fleet Street westward, attracted his attention. Looking that way, Mr. Cruncher made out that some kind of funeral was coming along, and that there was popular objection to this funeral, which engendered uproar. "Young Jerry," said Mr. Cruncher, turning to his offspring, "it's a burying." "Hurrah, father!" cried young Jerry. The young gentleman uttered this exultant sound with mysterious significance. The elder gentleman took the cry so ill that he watched his opportunity and smote the young gentleman on the ear. "What do you mean? What are you hoo-roaring at? What do you want to convey to your father, you young rip? This boy is getting too many for me," said Mr. Cruncher, surveying him. "Him and his hoo-roars. Don't let me hear no more of you, or you shall feel some more of me, do you hear?" "I wasn't doing no harm," young Jerry protested, rubbing his cheek. "Drop it, then," said Mr. Cruncher. "I won't have none of your no harms. Get atop of that seat there, and look at the crowd." His son obeyed, and the crowd approached. They were bawling and hissing round a dingy hearse and dingy mourning coach, in which mourning coach there was only one mourner, dressed in the dingy trappings that were considered essential to the dignity of the position. The position appeared by no means to please him, however, with an increasing rabble surrounding the coach, deriding him, making grimaces at him, and increasingly groaning and calling out, "Yeah, spies! Yeah, spies!" with many compliments too numerous and forceful to repeat. Funerals had at all times a remarkable attraction for Mr. Cruncher. He always pricked up his senses, and became excited when a funeral passed Tellson's. Naturally, therefore, a funeral with this uncommon attendance excited him greatly, and he asked for the first man who ran against him. "Who is it, brother? What's it about?" "I don't know," said the man. "Spies! Yeah, spies!" He asked another man, "Who is it?" "I don't know," returned the man, clapping his hands to his mouth nevertheless. and vociferating in a surprising heat, and with the greatest ardor, "Spies! Yeah, yeah, spies!" At length, a person better informed on the merits of the case tumbled against him, and from this person he learned it was the funeral of one Roger Cly. Was he a spy?" asked Mr. Cruncher. "Old Bailey spy," returned the informant. "Yeah, yeah, Old Bailey spies." "Why, to be sure," exclaimed Jerry, recalling the trial at which he had assisted. "I've seen him. Dead, is he?" "Dead as mutton," returned the other, "and can't be too dead. Have 'em out there. Spies! Pull 'em out there. Spies!" The idea was so acceptable, in the prevalent absence of any idea, that the crowd caught it up with eagerness, and loudly repeating the suggestion to have 'em out and to pull 'em out, mobbed the two vehicles so closely that they came to a stop. On the crowd's opening the coach doors, the one mourner scuffed out of himself, and was in their hands for a moment, but he was so alert, and made such good use of his time, that in another moment he was scouring away up a by-street, after shedding his cloak, hat, long hatband, waist-pocket handkerchief, and other symbolic tears. These the people tore to pieces and scattered far and wide with great enjoyment, while the tradesmen hurriedly shut up their shops, for a crowd in those times stopped at nothing, and was a monster much dreaded. They had already got the length of opening the hearse to take the coffin out, when some brighter genius proposed instead it be escorted to its destination amid general rejoicing. Practical suggestions being much needed, this suggestion too was received with acclamation, and the coach was immediately filled with 8 inside and a dozen out, while as many people got on the roof of the hearse as could, by any exercise of ingenuity, stick upon it. Among the first of these volunteers was Jerry Cruncher himself, who modestly concealed his spiky head from the observation of Tellson's in the further corner of the morning coach. The officiating undertakers made some protest against these changes in the ceremonies, but, the river being alarmingly near, and several voices remarking on the efficacy of cold immersion in bringing refractory members of the profession to reason, the protest was faint and brief. The remodeled procession started, with a chimney-sweep driving the hearse, advised by the regular driver, who was perched beside him under close inspection for the purpose, and with a pie-man, also attended by his cabinet minister, driving the morning coach. A bear-leader, a popular street character of the time, was impressed as an additional ornament before the cavalcade had gone far down the Strand, and his bear, who was black and very mangy, gave quite an undertaking air to the part of the procession in which he walked. Thus, with beer-drinking, pipe-smoking, song-roaring, and infinite caricaturing of woe, the disorderly procession went its way, recruiting at every step, and at all the shops shutting up before it. Its destination was the old church of St. Pancras, far off in the fields. It got there in course of time, insisted on pouring into the burial ground, finally accomplished the interment of the deceased Roger Cly in its own way, and highly to its own satisfaction. The dead man disposed of, and the crowd being under the necessity of providing some other entertainments for itself, another brighter genius, or perhaps the same, conceived the humor of impeaching casual passers-by as Old Bailey spies and wreaking vengeance on them. Chase was given to some scores of inoffensive persons who had never been near the Old Bailey in their lives, in the realization of this fancy, and they were roughly hustled and maltreated. The transition to the sport of window-breaking, and thence to the plundering of public houses, was easy and natural. At last, after several hours, when sundry summer houses had been pulled down, and some area railings had been torn up,